program might contain strong language. If you think you may be offended, switch off now.
Oops, I think I was on mute. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Watch Mojo. This is the Inside Podcast. I'm your host, Rob, and with me is Watch Mojo CEO and co-founder Ashkan Karbas-Fushan. How are you today, Ash?
I'm very good. Getting close to the end of the week. Had a board meeting this week. Had to prep for. Very busy, but things are good. Can't believe it's October. That's the other thing. It's a cliche, but the year went by pretty fast.
Canadian Thanksgiving weekend ahead of us also. A nice long weekend for us folks here. So for anybody who is new to this podcast, we spent the first 20 episodes looking at YouTube in depth, 20 episodes on YouTube's 20th anniversary and coincidentally Watch Mojo's 20th anniversary. So looking at both through Watch Mojo's lens. And from there, we decided to take a different approach. Every episode will focus on a different theme or topic. So far, we have covered America, capitalism, censorship, and today we're looking inside AI.
Yep, and not just AI in abstract and in theory. We're going to talk a little bit, obviously, about some of the key issues and themes, and then we'll look at some cases, interesting stories as, I guess humanity tries to find a happy, balance and, equilibrium, because clearly the genie's out of the bottle,
That's right. Before we get into that, a little bit of feedback from last week's episode. We always look at the comments. We want to know what people are saying and thinking about the things that we're posting. And, the inevitable criticism comes up about Watch Mojo talking about censorship and then, calling us woke mojo because some of the videos that we've posted. What's your take on that, Ash? And what do you think? Do you think the audience's interpretation is fair, or do we need to give some context or a little bit more clarity on our stance on things?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much clarity on our stance. I think, even whether a silent majority says something or a vocal minority says something, I personally am of the belief even one feedback is pertinent. Yes, I think as an entrepreneur, you have to ignore your biggest fan, your mom, and your biggest critic, your competition, or the investor that didn't invest and now all of a sudden they regret it. I like feedback. So I was always surprised when people are say woke mojo. But then I was like, well, let's put this into actual context. For one, I think being Canadian means that by and large, we are probably a little bit to the left on most matters. But the irony of it all is that, right now when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, people were like, well, he wasn't a radical. That's actually the view of many people, but it was the critics of that perspective that called that radical. So I think if you are an extreme, I don't mean extreme in a bad way, but if you have an extreme point of view on a spectrum, anybody that doesn't repeat that, you will accuse them of being radical or woke if it's to the left, right? So in general, I don't think it's fair or right because, personally, I'm pretty left. I'm like, if you're gay, be gay. If you are pro this or pro that, I'm like, live and let live. I'm definitely very much of just, my freedom ends when yours starts. So I kind of believe that. Economically and policy, I'm more right, and I've always been. Now, it's not Ash Mojo, it's Watch Mojo. But it's not like we ever top down tell people to write something or, we discuss ranks and topics, but we're not like Fox News here, So when I see that comment of woke mojo, I laugh. Although what's funny is I sometimes internally just go, the country's not where it was. Certain woke themes have moved on, there's been a regression to the mean. And we cover the zeitgeist. We cover the mood of the country. Sure, politics, some current affairs. Entertainment, some current affairs. So, and I'll land my plane here. What I realized was more, we are a media company. Mm-hmm. By nature, we're not recruiting accountants. We're not recruiting engineers. we're recruiting a lot of younger, i.e., more idealistic, more creative people whose profile tends to be more left of center, we'll call it. So it's kind of normal that when we cover things, even if we don't have a stance, that comes across, because at the end of the day, it's a human being that's researching and writing.
Mhm.
And for me, like as I said it, would I have wanted us to go against the grain? I mean, you guys always hear me. I'm like, when they go here, we should go here. You know, when the herd is jumping off a bridge because some bigger, greater fool is doing so, I'm like, let's, zag when others, go the other direction. But the point was, yeah, like let's say if you were a member of the LGBTQ community at WatchMojo and you're writing a script, for me to kind of be like, oh, we should be totally like insensitive, that was like a lack of empathy. It was more like, well, what kind of leader are you? Or like when the Black Lives Matter movement was happening, yeah, it was clear that some people were hijacking the movement and abusing it. But if in a given entry, I'm like, no, we should include or exclude that to make a point. Well, yeah, if you have people of color on your team and they look at you and they're like, well, this guy's an a-hole. So my point was, I don't think it was so much to like influence, like we cover it. We like I said, we don't take ourselves seriously. We take what we do seriously.
Yeah.
But I just think that was more a reflection of just understanding and reading the room, that like the US and Western, cultures were undergoing a certain social shift and not wanting to be tone deaf. So if we don't include Louis C.K. in the funniest comedians, when he admits that he was playing with himself with fellow comedians in the room or on the phone or whatever he was doing, was that woke, or was that just being empathetic that, hey, if somebody was ever abused sexually, they probably wouldn't look at me and say, hey, that's a good leader to, join and work with. So it wasn't so much external facing, but I think it's fair that if some writer wrote something, it wasn't like the machines were writing this, that were like, write this in the most neutral way possible in order not to offend anybody. And frankly, in media, if you try not to offend anybody, if you try not to upset anybody, you're going to be irrelevant very quickly. So I thought it was interesting. I had seen it. I never really experienced it because we've been pretty laissez-faire, hands off. But I do think, given the fact that human beings produce the content, yeah, it's just a reflection of the company and our, management and culture.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think a lot of people have this assumption that we have this political agenda that we're trying to push, which is not the case. It's just,
well, I mean, the reality is, if you poll 10 people that vote for Republicans, they'll say we're super Democrats, and if you vote the hardcore Democrats, they're like, we're not left enough and we're a bunch of Nazis. You're like, okay. So it's also good that just to ignore a bit the crazies on either side, and I say that half affectionately.
Right. So if you have further comments or feedback about that, leave them in the comments so that for us to check that out. But enough about politics. Today we're talking about AI, and there's already a bunch of cool comments here asking questions and giving their opinions on things. But let's just set this up by putting things into the context of WatchMojo. So we're a media company. AI is all around us. There's a lot of people posting videos about it on YouTube and all over the place online. Where does AI fit in your mind into the WatchMojo framework? And is it going to shake things up in a major way?
Well, I think in general, WatchMojo has experienced a lot of like technology cycles. When we started off, we'd use Microsoft, Excel. We'd send each other reports that were, outdated the instant you press send. And then like Google Docs came along, and that was a real improvement. It was wonky. The technology improved. None of us want to go back to a day when we'd be sending each other Microsoft files, because that was not efficient. We used to invest a ton in, servers and storage devices, literally in the office. And then both the size of the storage would shrink physically while there was more capacity. And then eventually, after AWS and other cloud technology innovations, wow, our needs were addressed and things changed and everything became faster. So I personally, on the one hand, view AI as just the latest shiny tool, which, yes, I think, again, I like matrices and quadrants. I think AI is both defensive, like operational, tactical, but it's also very much offensive, like especially generative AI, which you could generate things that previously didn't exist. And I would say when we first came around it, I did feel like the quality, think of the Will Smith spaghetti eating example. Like the quality of that demo is exponentially. Like the March 23 there, that's not kosher. The October 25, if you showed it to somebody, not in the context, well, maybe not that frame, but if you showed that to somebody, they would be like, okay, well, that's Will Smith having pasta.
If you look at it quickly.
Yeah. So for us, though, the first year, both because the quality wasn't there, I was like, there's no rush for us to even take this that seriously. And it was very much bottom up. I was like, let the team figure out what tools make sense. And to me, it was like, even if in a hospital they use automation to do surgery, there is still a doctor supervising, right? So we were always very much that like humans and machine can accomplish more. Now, of course, in the year, the quality has improved dramatically, the capabilities, the speed. And I just, again, look at it as, if there are things that we could do now that we couldn't before, while we maintain quality, while the stories we tell, the videos we produce are authentic and they're accurate and they have their soul intact, then, I think the company's actually been really impressive, apart from a few people who either from inexperience, from insecurity, from maybe not being, frankly, like realistic, or maybe they're being petty, or maybe they're not team players or whatever. There are a few people in any cohort who are like, nope, this wasn't made here. Like technology, if a firm doesn't make it, it sucks, when there might be better technology. There are some people who are just going to be insecure. They're like, well, what does this mean to me if I can't write? But I'm like, look, it's a tool. Like I personally increasingly for myself use either to start off if I have an idea, just as a coming out of the gates faster, or I'll use it a lot to edit, synthesize, clean it up so that to the end user, it's more palatable. And that's what I've always done. If you put yourself in the shoes of the client or the viewer, then you can't really go wrong, right? So that's WatchMojo. And we have used it like when we did Siege of Tyre. There's no footage of Alexander's soldiers building a bridge and leveling Tyre off the coast of modern day Lebanon. So we created it like that. Again, I thought some of the viewers who are like, oh, and we would say augmented by AI just as a test. I think that's just consumer behavior changing. I think if let's say we did that video 3 months ago, I think if we did it now, there would be less resistance. And if we do it in 3 months, even less resistance.
That's it. And one of the popular comments was, you should have hired an artist to do this instead of getting it from AI. So I want to go to the comments because there's one that has kind of like a similar sentiment. AJ Thomas says, I never trusted AI because it's not a human performance. It will take away someone's talent, art, creativity, and performance. It's very concerning to me, as well as other actors and film crews. So this ties into some of the stories we wanted to talk about regarding Hollywood, actors. Just recently, CAA came out and warned against AI in Hollywood, in films. So like, what are your thoughts on this?
So let's put that into context. So Sora is a ChatGPT OpenAI tool. And they kind of went with the easier to ask forgiveness than permission. They kind of said, we're going to include media companies' intellectual property, IP, in training Sora so that it could generate things. So a lot of issues here. To be clear, nobody, at least not me, is saying like, F the children, like screw the creatives. Like that's not at all what's happening. But to think that like Disney or Fox cares about talent, I think is a false premise to begin with, right? Apart from A-listers, apart from the face on the network, the 6 o'clock news, like the stars, media companies have been sodomizing their employees for the last few decades now in a clear one-way direction. They will look at violating rules and breaking laws, and that's just, I think, their default mode, right? Partly because everybody wants to be a storyteller, everybody wants to work in the recording industry, everybody wants to make movies, so they definitely exploit that demand and supply, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. So, but there's a difference between Disney saying, well, we own this IP, Disney or MCU, and we'll make decisions, versus another company, in this case, a technology company, OpenAI, coming along and giving itself permission. So I definitely disagree with that whole Bay Area ethos of, hey man, we're going to do what we want, move fast, break things, and too bad. But that is the ethos of these builders, entrepreneurs, engineers, investors. They don't care, right? Google indexed the web, and it was like websites were kind of screwed. They wanted the traffic, but were they okay if Google indexed all their websites and got access to their intellectual property? If you fast forward 20 years, Google's now extracting that information and showing snippets of the data you're searching. And this is why owned and operated websites are in a state of like perpetual decline, because there's no way to put the genie back in the bottle. If I'm looking for how long to put this chicken pot pie in an oven, what temperature, I don't go to the website and hear about the author growing up in Vermont and the grandma made this. And it's like, no,
as nice as that is.
Yeah. So the idea is that obviously these media companies have seen the rise of YouTube, they've seen Facebook, they've seen Google, and they're trying not to replicate, repeat history. Now, for CAA, whom in theory are our agents, because we were rep by ICM and CAA bought ICM. So this is really not about CAA, but I did want to disclose that. William Morris has come out and said the same thing. I think this says maybe a bit more about the agency business, because agents ultimately historically made 15% on deals they brought you. Sometimes it's lower, 5-10%, whatever. But my point is, if you were to have, let's say, Cameron Diaz, let's use Cameron Diaz. So she's a person. She doesn't even own the IP of the movies, but I want to use her for, you'll see why. Let's say Cameron Diaz, who I heard quit acting because she was tired of the sexism or whatever, unless I'm wrong. But let's say Cameron Diaz, it's her body, it's her likeness, it's her agency. If she were to say OpenAI or Facebook, here is my likeness. You cannot do obviously porn. You cannot do anything political. I'm not taking stance. But you can use me in news broadcast snippets or scripted ideas that I approve. You could use me even in ads. Again, I want to approve. Just cut me a check. The agencies are a bit squeezed here because the value that they provide is quantifiable, no doubt. But agents only make money when there's a clear notional amount. Like, we're paying you $1 million. Okay, our fee's $150K.
Yeah.
But in a world where the technology companies want to be the clearinghouse of everything, commerce, content, community, exchanges, whatever, I think a lot of the agents are also just freaking out saying, yeah, it's too speculative. There may be money, but you don't want to give away, the milk because nobody's going to buy the cow type of thing.
Yeah. So it's the middlemen who are kind of getting cut out of this. What about this actress, Tilly Norwood, who's emerged and she's being touted at, she touted as the first AI actress that has people in an outrage saying, what is this? This isn't, she's not a real person. Like, she doesn't count as an actress. How could this be?
So this is actually a bit more complicated for a few reasons. So when there was the strike in Hollywood, the creative community was freaking out over the past, meaning all the streaming revenue. Like when Netflix buys a show, they just give you your budget plus, let's say, 15 or 30% markup, I think. But they don't really give you royalty residual. It's a pain to manage. Why would they? They have leverage. But so one concern was, well, what about royalties on streaming, which is now big business, and you're putting a lot of projects on streaming versus theatrical and whatever. Well, let's not discuss that. The second one was AI. That was the future. They were like, oh my God, we see what's happening. So I fully encourage the creative community to stand up and say, no, that's their right. But that is very much the incumbents. Those are the celebrities and the stars. In the near term, I don't think anybody wants to see like a feature film with an AI actress. But the same way that nobody in Hollywood, also the agents told Hollywood, don't embrace YouTube, and now they're fucked. So that was bad advice, but it was because YouTube didn't give a check. It was revenue share, right? So let's call a spade a spade. But so understandably, the same way that a lot of people are not going to embrace this, they're going to basically make themselves irrelevant to the younger audiences. And as consumer behavior changes, people thought YouTube was weird. Not anymore. I thought Roblox, I have a ton of shares in Roblox. I don't think I've ever logged in. I'm a big believer. I don't get it. I get it as a business. I don't get, like, same way I personally at 47 don't care about Tilly Norwood. But if I was 17 or even 27 and I start growing up with these characters, I'm going to develop that rapport with them. Now, Hollywood near term is not replacing Tom Cruise, is not replacing whichever hot babe they paid $25 million yet. But yes, the extras, all the other people, that is where the issue comes up. Now, where I do think is a bit, we talked about censorship, and that's being the government punishing you, not a company. I have nothing against Javier Bardem, who's a very good actor. I also respect anybody that takes any stance that could harm their paycheck regardless. I'm not saying I agree with them or disagree, but anybody who will say, screw my paycheck, I'm going to take a stand on principle, I am not here to cast a stone. But if you are, let me give you a kind of a crazy, like, purposely not trying to be shock here. Let's say you are a studio boss. This is a bit purposely. You think Javier Bardem would have been your gardener if it was not for you having made them into a star. You may or may not be Jewish. You wake up and you see Javier Bardem that in your eyes you created into somebody who's not an Uber driver, nothing wrong with that, or your gardener. And he goes out there and says, Israel is bad, Palestine is this, screw you, screw that. I guarantee you that studio head goes, F this guy. And F all these actors who are nobodies. We take the risk. We take the risk to produce these movies. We fund their marketing. We send them everywhere. And now they're using their fame to become political, which does two things. In general, it alienates half the audience. All of a sudden, Gal Gadot cannot be cast because if she's Israeli, the crazies on one side go and attack her. And if Javier Bardem says, no, that side is crazy, a bunch of others go, well, this guy's a bum. We don't like him. We're boycotting the movie. So yes, I don't think it's right. But given what people do themselves, in this case, actors, I understand why studios are like, screw this, we need plan B. There's no reason why we hire 100 extras, have to buy them food, have to have extra insurance. We could use AI. So what is happening now is the water is not boiling yet, and Hollywood thinks we are special, people like us. You're not that special. You're special, but not that special. So I think what's happening is that water is going to get hotter and hotter. AI will replace a lot of the extras. AI will hire a lot of things. We'll setting scenes. We'll do it whether we like it or not. It is inevitable to some extent. But yeah, the big names are going to be protected. But think of all the directors, that produced movies, and then it turns out they grabbed their assistant's butt and then they got canceled because of Me Too. The movie ends. Yeah, you better believe it. Studios, if they had half a brain, they would be doing this faster. Not saying I agree with it, but I'm not here to tell you always what's right. I'm also telling you like how people think. So it's undoubtable that this is where things are going.
Yeah, so many different ways that we could approach this. There's a lot of really good comments, though, that I want to tackle. So Enigma asks, what do you think a new decentralized web would look like if people start moving away from its current state due to AI? And I'm interested in this question because I know that you are big on Web3. A couple of years ago when NFTs were all the rage, we were talking daily about Web3, and it's kind of cooled down. But yeah. I would like your take on this.
Sure. I mean, first of all, I think NFTs, anything in its first iteration is bullshit or fad or hype or vaporware. NFTs also had a very unfortunate name, non-fungible tokens. But the idea of tying ownership, tracking, analytics, commercialization in digital media, whether it's art, whether it's movies, music, I'm producing some projects where I'm looking at the fiber of those ideas, using blockchain and all that, baking in ownership rights. But so let's start off with the web. The web is, everything is like a bullshit, if you think about it. The web is seen as this democratic, very open place. Nonsense. AOL, one of the first successful early portals, was a walled garden. Fast forward 2 decades, Facebook, a walled garden. Google search is a black box. I would live in a homeless shelter if it wasn't for like YouTube. So I'm very indebted to YouTube. I'm a loyal person, but YouTube's algorithm is a bit of a black box, right? So what I'm saying is, for as much as the web is this democratic place relative to gatekeeper Hollywood and its archaic model, the web is not really all that democratic. Let's admit that. But now, that being said, on a relative basis compared to traditional, it's the greatest thing ever, right? It's open. So yeah, I do think though that I have seen, both as an entrepreneur, as an operator, but also as an investor, like I've seen people pitch me this like 50, I've had not 50, I probably have 10 to 25 of these things. A lot of people come along and want to create a new YouTube, a new this, a new that, a different this, a different that. That basically goes, okay, you know, even viewers could make money by watching, which, by the way, if you incentivize viewers to watch, it creates a problem for advertisers, because then you get a lot of fake viewers. But let's set that aside. But the issue is, YouTube today is more dominant in video than Google is in search. The reason for that is Google became dominant because it had an incredible technology, so the product was A+. It also really wisely gave away its search to publishers to put on their website, and it bought Spring's Applied Semantics, so it built AdSense into this juggernaut. And then when it bought DoubleClick, it became the backbone of its ad empire. So Google's dominance is like this three-headed monster, where whether it's Google, whether it's Android, whether it's YouTube, like for Alphabet, where their products are pretty darn good, the distribution is off the chart, and they got built-in monetization. So the problem is, if I, let's say, were producing, you know, a new, let's say, series, I've thought of, like, I would never, I have too much pride maybe. I would never go to the YouTube WatchMojo community and be like, Kickstarter, you know, like Vox a few years ago, despite having raised $450 million, they were asking their viewers for like donations. So I was like, okay, how is this going to look? Tell me you have a venture capitalist on your cap table without telling me you have a venture capitalist on your cap table. Anyway, but the point I want to get to is, I've thought of, not because we need the money and the budgeting side, but I was like, yeah, it would be cool if I could think of a way where, let's say, through a Kickstarter, I have to think of the details. But I would love people's opinion here. I would love it if we could tell, it's not so much that we need your money, but in order to show to either a Netflix or to a HBO or to a parent, I'm being very transparent. This isn't, I like, run with it if somebody wants to do this. To show them that there's interest, I'm like, okay, everybody buys a token. It's like a $5, you know, contribution. You raise money, obviously, in escrow that you then use to fund development or production. But everybody that paid for that gets basically participation in the profits of that franchise. So one of the reasons why I'm dusting off like the WatchMojo studios and all the formats that we developed is because I'm like, okay, when people used to ask me about NFTs, I was like, yeah, I'm not interested in like some digital art of a monkey that through just speculation is worth supposedly $45,000. That's nonsense. But I was like, it's a shame, because if everybody that wanted to be part of, like, think the Green Bay Packers, their fans are shareholders, right? Yeah. So I was like, if people could fund projects and then be co-owners and receive royalties, that is something that I will probably look into. So now, but that's again, not, I think that is possible. I don't think it's easy just if you have a better shiny toy, if you don't have the audience and if you don't have the monetization. You know, this is why, as much as people hate to embrace YouTube, like our friends at BuzzFeed a few years ago, now they could be accused of being woke, not saying that they are, but BuzzFeed a few years ago was like, we don't care about YouTube, we're going to build our own trivia apps on our website. This year, they were like, we're returning our channels to YouTube because that's where the audience is. So the audience is really the energy, the blood you need to survive. So all these other products come to market, but I'm like, well, how do you cut through the clutter? That's the issue.
We have a question from Yvonne. He's asking, saying, you mentioned property and the basis of property on the web. This is one of the main points of contention against AI. So is everything on the web open to general use in the name of innovation? Or, you know, like, what's the idea?
Very good question. So no, but again, first of all, I am, like, through experience, become quite well versed in copyright. So we when I looked into copyright like 15 years ago to really figure out like how to both build a business but not to get sued, I obviously had to learn about fair use or fair dealing. And fair use, there's 4 tests: purpose of the new work, amount of the underlying work you use, impact of the new work on the old work, and the nature of the underlying work. And for example, if I use a Getty stock image, the purpose of that is to be licensed. You can't, unless you really do like, we're going to analyze this picture and you're really commenting and it's non-commercial, like you could argue fair use, but ceteris paribus, all factors being equal, that's not fair use. Now, I learned about the concept when it comes to purpose. So we do commentary, criticism. So it's generally that is a form like parody or news where generally prima facie, you're like, okay, that could be fair use. But you also learn about the concept of transformativeness. So if you were to take something and change it somehow, and one famous precedent was the Mona Lisa, where an artist just put like I think a mustache on her upper lip, and it was just that. But the courts, even though I don't even know who the copyright, I don't think of the Mona Lisa, but let's say it was a picture, so the photographer may have been like this. But the point I'm getting at is the courts concluded that that was transformative, even if you're like, well, that's not transformative. So my argument when I started to research this was not my argument, my conclusion, and not as a guy, like you could argue I'm biased for fair use because I watch Mojo, but AI, you can't really say I have a bias in it. My argument was the least transformative AI output is more transformative than the most fair use kind of other example. You understand what I mean?
That's
like
interesting.
If to me, as a guy that is both an artist, let's say, but a business person, studies finance, knows enough about the law, I'm like, if you take like a song and it's not really a sample, but like you transform it to the point where like Two Life Crew, there's a lot of cases I've studied. I was like, isn't that derivative? But the courts were like, no, this is transformative. So if you boil it down, Yvonne's question, but also this discourse, there is an argument that says, no, these are all derivative works, and the rights holder has the same rights to the underlying work as this derivative work. I don't agree with that. I actually think, and this hurts a lot of people, but that's their problem, I think you're actually transforming the art. And it's clear, right? Like if you were to take, I remember like in Ozzy's repertoire, there's a riff in Lightning Strikes and Crazy Train, kind of similar, same artist, so not a big deal. But what I'm getting at is you see sometimes, yeah, this song is a ripoff of the other, but the hypocrisy of creatives, and I'm one, is Kingdom Come was criticized of being a Led Zeppelin clone. But Led Zeppelin itself was cloning Robert Johnson, who sold his soul to the devil. But I assure you that mofo Robert Johnson did not sell his soul to the devil. He was basically inspired by other artists of the South, or he was a Black American, or people in Africa, or people in the Caribbean that maybe sang these songs, and then he just put a guitar track to it, right? So I love media. Hollywood is the fakest place in the world because people don't have self-awareness. They don't have any common sense. What this is, and I'll show you why, it's not even anything to do with Hollywood. It's just human beings are hypocrites. The biggest critics of a lot of tools that YouTube introduces to help new creators are established YouTubers. The YouTubers that built their audience, that now earn their living from just pontificating or streaming, when they feel that, forget AI for a second, when they feel like, hey, this is a tool that smaller channels could cut through the clutter or be discovered, they're the wankers who then complain because they have now made it and they want to close the door behind them.
Right.
So this is more human nature. So all this does is, I'm not saying every AI is legit. There's a lot of it this is wrong, but I'm just saying it's if you choose not to participate in the battleground, it's your loss. Society moves on, and we already see the genie is out of the bottle.
Yeah, I think this ties into some of the other questions that we hear, and Raman left some amazing ones. I'm going to try to get to all of them. But the first one is, do you think the real challenge with AI isn't just technological progress, but aligning the incentives of those building the AI systems with the long-term well-being of society?
Okay.
Kind of goes with the fair use thing.
Yeah, I mean, I will just say, by the way, we did, like I did on Context TV, something on AI and storytelling. If we want, we should probably add that in the comments, because we break it down really granularly, like every function of every production. But so here's the practical thing. When I started my career, I was an East Coast guy living in Montreal. I'd go to New York all the time. New York, yes, it's amazing. It's my favorite city in the world, because you meet people who are artists. You meet, yes, bankers who are like driven. You meet designers. You meet musicians, athletes. Like, nobody cares who you are, because, and there's always somebody far more successful than you. So it's great to just blend in. LA is half the city, if not more. It's Hollywood. And it's, you know, I like the people, but it is a very fake city. Like, the people are fine, but the industry is fake as ass. But that's fine. But San Francisco, I mean, look, I love San Francisco. Forget the drugs and the homeless, which again is a talking point. Perhaps I haven't been in a while. I never left San Francisco saying, "Oh, I don't want to leave," or like, "I wish I stayed," because it was also such a one-dimensional city where everybody was in tech, right? Frankly, but the people who built these tech companies, they do not know, nor do they care about what they build. It is a culture that is 99% driven by profit. There are no principles. Snap, Evan built Snap to send 6-second nudie pics. Facebook, the Facebook, was created because Mark Zuckerberg wanted to rate the female classmates at Harvard. Those things then evolved, and history was rewritten that, oh, it's here to bring people together or some other nonsense. So I don't think that most of the people even building these tools understand the socioeconomic, you know, the externalities that they unleash, and they don't care. I think what this comment and other people may kind of fall for the trap, and this is what we said before the show, that when technology cures polio, cures cancer, does these wonderful things, it's boring. It'll be discussed in a newspaper or in a medical journal. They might discuss it in the 30th minute of a news show, but nobody cares. Whereas when you take your application and you apply it to pop culture, then people actually consume it, and that's when it goes viral. So I think when the chat GPTs, but all of them, Claude, Anthropic, all of them, we're focusing on chat GPT because it's very popular. But when all these companies are doing things, it's only when their application spills over to things that they consume and touch and feel, and where there's usually this nostalgia and this goodwill with it, where people get sensitive. What I find fascinating is I don't really see any doctors complaining about AI. Doctors have God complexes, rightfully. You know, a doctor can save you, so it's fair for them to have a God complex. But I haven't seen any of them look at AI and be like, this sucks, because they understand I could serve more patients, I could save more lives, I could do things faster, I can minimize mistakes. So I'm always like that, you know, that picture of Jose Mourinho, where the coach of the soccer coach, where he's just taking off his headset, like, cut this shit. So when I hear artists, I'm an artist myself, I love music, I love movies, I respect them. But when I hear artists or writers say AI can't do this or that, I'm like, shut the fuck up.
Well, that's it. So much of the negative discourse surrounding AI comes from the applications in the world of art and entertainment. Like, that's really what it boils down to. It can be applied in so many other areas, and you never hear any complaints about it, or very rarely.
Yeah. So there's another question, I think, just comparing with other tech advances. Look, I'm not saying anything you haven't heard. AI is a much more steeper, exponential impact. I do think the payoff for those builders that I call principleless hacks, which is half joking, I do think for them it's AGI, like artificial general intelligence, where it starts to act like humans. Yeah. Now, that I think is a bit different. I think I think that to me is a fully separate thing, because I'm never in favor of like pure unbridled automation. Same way I'm not a fan of, I'm a capitalist. I love capitalism, but I don't believe in unbridled laissez-faire capitalism, because I understand human psychology and people are greedy. People will cheat, unfortunately. People will do bad things. But all to say that it is very different, because the typewriter, I think as much as a writer liked the nature of a typewriter, I still like to write on pen and paper. I recognize that the computer and the internet make me faster. The reason why AI freaks people out, again, we're not saying it rocket science here, is because they feel they could be replaced. That is loser mentality. A winning mentality, the people that succeed in life understand how skilled they are. They recognize their comparative advantage. They recognize what they do better than others. And if they had 2/3 of a brain, they would be like, I could use this to be better at what I do. But that's the difference between those that are like entrepreneurial winners versus the people that are defeatist and kind of bring themselves down. So you have to look at this tool as an amplifier, as like a leverage for your skills to do more. I would hire infinite number of creatives who are open-minded about any technology, cloud, AI, anything. But I really do not have any patience for people who are just negative and not constructive. Like, you could be adverse, bearish, negative on something, but be constructive with how to fix it, how to make it better. So when I, we talk about empathy, why didn't I insist that Bill Cosby should be on a list? Because empathy. You don't want to be an asshole to your team who's like clearly seeing the world change. I also don't shove AI. I'm like, fuck, if you don't want to use AI, you're the moron. But we are at a point now where I don't find that people that do not use AI I find, let me avoid the double negative. People that just put their head in the sand with AI in any field will have not just zero value to employers, they will actually be negative value creators. Because any job I would look to hire, I would expect them to use AI at least to research, at least to avoid some blind spots. So if anybody we hire should use AI, why would we build this archaic system and organization that's just paranoid about, are you using AI? It's more disclose it. How did you use it? And this is also why schools are useless. If schools and teachers are that insecure that they're preventing kids from mastering these tools, they're just even bigger fucktards than I thought that they were.
We mentioned AGI, and that may be on the horizon, but as it relates to this question, as AI becomes more capable, do you think the biggest risk is the loss of control over the technology itself, or is it over how humans choose to use it? What's the bigger?
Okay, so I mean, first of all, I'm not a clairvoyant. I do want to start off with that, but I feel humans. Pierre Omidyar, a French-Iranian entrepreneur who founded eBay, they asked him, so you built the system where trust is baked in, right? Like, if I buy something from you, you have to ship it to me. Do you get half of it now? There's escrow, whatever. But the trust was a key thing. He said something that stuck to me. He said, I believe people are good by default. I don't buy that. I think dogs are good. I think children are good. And then their experiences, that's one. And two, how they react to those experiences makes them good or bad. If I get robbed, let's say, I could choose to go dark and kill people, right? But I can be robbed and be like, #gratitude, because I lost a pair of shoes. Somebody stole my CDs. When I was 20-ish, some guy broke into my car, stole all my CDs, memories, but it was just CDs. The songs remained. My tennis racket. I was happy. I was like, you're an idiot for leaving all this in your car exposed. But I'm like, don't get attached to material objects. You could lose them. But what I'm getting at is, I do think people, not 50%, a lot of people cannot control temptation and darkness and, wrath and all that. So I am not personally as worried about the technology itself doing batshit crazy things, which is a possibility if full AGI happens, I definitely think the biggest risk is human beings. Human beings are the ones that kill each other. Human beings are the ones that rape one another. Human beings steal from each other, fully knowing what the law is. So absolutely, you give a nuclear weapon, even America, which I think is the greatest country in the world, all factors being said, America dropped 2 nukes on the Japanese. You could argue it was to end the war and not make it drag out. Motherfuckers dropped 2 nuclear bombs on cities. That's fact, right? So I do think the bigger danger is the Saddam Husseins, the George W. Bushes, to be fair, the Hamas leader, the Bibi, whatever your politics. But people, when you give them these tools, not everybody knows the limits of the destruction. So I think, yeah, humans are the ones that, we're the ones that come up with the bad shit.
Do you think that we should be trusting the AI landscape to self-regulate, or is there, should we be trying to direct it into a certain direction?
Well, a couple things again. So Saint, not Benedict, but some saint had said it's easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. Then there's precedent and track record. The creators of tech, largely Silicon Valley and their investors, this is a culture that moves fast, breaks things, and doesn't give 2 Fs. So let's now be realistic. So no, I do not think that this cohort will restrict themselves because they are all chasing the multi-trillion-dollar valuations, right? Like, why would Sam Altman at OpenAI hold himself back if he sees Anthropic doing something more, pushing the envelope? We said inside Mojo, one of the reasons YouTube won, many, go watch episode 2 or 3, was because they were very loose with piracy. Let's just be honest. So no, I do not think that they will self-regulate. But there is no fucking way that a government technocrat should have anything to do. The morons at the EU, there is not a single company amongst the top 25 or 50 most valuable in the world out of Europe. I love Europe to go eat good food, enjoy great weather, look at their lovely ladies. You have to be a fucking moron to set up your company in the EU. Just fact. Maybe there's Estonia. Maybe there's a country, Poland or Hungary, that's not going down the crapper. I would never set up a company in France, let alone have Macron and his minions decide EU. What do they know? So no. And I see it in Canada. I love Canada. Greatest country to live. But the morons at the government that keep giving money to the stupid, it's all kleptocracy, kekistocracy, it's nepotism, whatever you want to call it. So no, I do not think that any government should be involved, because government also has a track record of incompetence and not just ineptitude, but bad faith and doing a lot of questionable things. So where does this go? Let's go back to episode 2 on capitalism, the invisible hand. I don't believe in the invisible hand, but yes, I do think, though, that when Sam Altman hears his greed whispering, saying he's going to push the envelope, and then you see Hollywood instill fear in him and threaten him with wrath, legal, if he does not back down, that is all you need. Same thing with other more important applications in health. Absolutely. Is somebody going to die because a doctor used a bit too much AI? Yeah, of course. People die all the time, if not malpractice, inexperience, applying the wrong medication. I knew somebody, they went in just to do a like a scan of their body, but they injected this liquid, so your organs like flash and during the x-ray, and they were allergic to it. They died in 24 hours. Just a mistake. I'm not saying AI would have prevented it or not, but the first idiot journalist that goes there and says, oh, AI killed somebody, no, you moron. People will make more mistakes. I'll say this about WatchMojo. I love the team. I love it. Give me your most, and I use woke quotation marks. Give me your wokest, crazy, radical, all of them. I love them all. The more extreme, and they're actually too tame. I try to push them to be more. But the number of mistakes, our batting is really high. Like, nobody bats for 1,000, but we make like one mistake out of 300 entries or whatever. If you think about it, how much we got. So I let it slide. I'll send feedback to avoid it. But let's be honest. as the technology improves, humans are the ones that make the mistake. The AI will correct that. So I think your best bet with AI, given the pace, given how the stakes, also the geopolitical risk, China versus USA. So any government that gets involved, like the EU, generally stifles innovation. So no government whatsoever.
What you just said about Watch Mojos and making mistakes, it kind of relates directly to this question. Could AI ever match the editorial judgment and pop culture instinct that Watch Mojo's team brings?
That's a fair question. So again, I use AI like Ask GPT more and more, despite the fact that at first as a writer, I absolutely hated it. Like forget that, and there's one employee, they sent me feedback and I was like, again, lack of self-awareness. What do you think I am? I go, you don't think I'm worried about AI? Like, I'm like, anyway. But so let me be honest with you. In the 2010s, I knew the limitation. The joke is, if I just did what I knew, every list would be 80s hard rock, Seinfeld, So we hired like experts who were, unlike me, didn't just see movies of a period in a genre, right? I was very open-minded of what I didn't know. And so we built a team who were like really fans and domain experts, but who had like the professionalism to say, okay, maybe and Marvel is higher than DC right now. Like even if they were DC fans, like that was a key part of what I looked for, like intellectual honesty. But I admit that given the explosion of more franchises and more IPs and more sports and more music, I do think that the ideal combination in anything is human and machine. So do I think that AI could replace humans? I think for a percentage, whether it's 50, 30, 70, that's moot. I think for a percentage, it is plausible that the quality is indistinguishable to the normal eye. There's that other percentage where it'll be an absolute no. Right now, that could be 70%. In 5 years, it could be only 7%, though, because AI trains and does get better, whereas humans, not so much, right? We kind of, you don't teach an old dog new tricks. But I do think, though, and I've said this, if I was starting WatchMojo today, and this might be something for the aspiring entrepreneurs, AI would be a bigger part of the operation, but never autopilot. Like humans would be involved. It's either start human, finish machine, or vice versa. I think for WatchMojo, we do, and given just our principles, and I think for WatchMojo, I rather go upstream than downstream. We will never out AI slop the AI slop. So to say we're going to get into this like battle of scale, which I always hated, that makes no sense. But what I tell the team is, hey, just because I don't yell at you because you made a stupid error doesn't mean that we don't look like asshats when you make that stupid error. So if you're telling me you're not using AI because you think you're some hotshot, stuff it. Use whatever tools you have. If 20 years ago you didn't Google something, you would lose to other people. It's like the travel agents. No, our clients want our hands-on. Okay, but then the travel agents that did not use search engines and all that, they died, right? So I think in some cases the AI will be able to match taste and many other things, but I don't think it'll ever be 100%, and it will never be all supply chain. No smart company would 100% automate things. I think generally what you want to do in your supply chain per given product, per given industry, is find what step does it not make sense for a human to do so that the human can focus on the thing that might kill somebody. And that's what the smart companies are going to do. And I'll be honest, for about a year, I was tiptoeing around this. Now I'm like, could care less, because how many more times can we explain this? And frankly, our culture is so good that what I realized is there wasn't really resistance amongst the team. They just wanted clarity and guidance, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, you used the term AI slop, and I'm glad you did, because that's something that I wanted to bring up. What do you think about the abundance of low quality AI generated stuff that has made its way onto the internet? We see that, you know, Spotify is deleting millions of AI generated songs. People are talking about dead internet theory, where, you know, AI is producing faulty information that's being used by other AI to produce more faulty information. Pretty soon we're going to have no good information left on the internet. You know, do you think that's a slippery or dangerous slope? Where do you think we're headed in that regard?
Again, I like parallels. So 20 years ago, people were like, oh, this UGC content is crap. But you know what? The mofos that were mastering how to film on iPhones or editing on the go, you know, using TikToks, native editing tools, which at the time were pretty revolutionary, they're the leading storytellers now. Nobody gives a fuck about George Clooney. Like, I love George Clooney, but George Clooney is like telling people how to live here, and now he's like bragging he's in France. Yeah, I don't need George Clooney being in the movie going forward. So again, the people that master these tools to tell stories are the next Mr. Beasts. They are the next PewDiePies. There's a young Ash somewhere that is like, I could do this. His first things may be AI slop, and maybe one of a million AI slop goes viral and people go, what happens? The key is using those tools. You know, when you started with search engines, you had Boolean searches like Madrid plus hotel less Spain, which doesn't make sense. But my point was, eventually you realize you didn't need to put those Boolean characters, you just searched it. But the people that kind of didn't learn how to search, well, were they like in demand by news organizations? You know, if you're looking for writers to build up your team, and the guy's like, I don't believe in Google, you know, like, would you be like, this person is competent? So I do think that in the initial stages, sure, there's going to be slop. There's slop everything. You know, ESPN started off with programming lacrosse, second division, Connecticut. That's what they start off with. MTV, their hosts, put on their own makeup. There was no sport. There was nothing. It was support, not sport. And then eventually they improve. So the people that get all high and mighty early on, like, I don't like AI. I don't like half the stuff that happens. But the people that really just put their head in the sand might as well put a bullet in their head.
As far as YouTube is concerned, do you sense any hypocrisy in their attitude towards AI? They've demonetized AI generated trailer channels, for example, but now we've discovered that they're using AI to enhance short videos without permission. So like, their stance on it seems to be a little bit mixed.
So, you know, for somebody who, again, is very indebted to YouTube, I'm both very critical, but also I do want to state that because I defend them and I don't want to imply that they're perfect. They're not, but I think it's the lesser of many evils. YouTube is a far more dovish, better partner than some others, right? I think the issue is they themselves realize that if they do not embrace these tools and master these tools, introduce these tools to their audience, then they may lose some creators who will embrace other platforms who may not have a big reach right now, but could. So they have to experiment. What I think you're describing is more of just YouTube being a big department. Right hand rarely talks to left hand. There are silos. We get a lot of stuff that if I didn't know how organizations function, I would be like, this is bullshit. This is unfair. But I'm like, this is just organizational behavior and, you know, red tape and stuff like that. Now, are they hypocritical? All incumbents are hypocritical. Google, with Google.com search, was, we don't share our algorithm. It's a black box. Leave us alone. When Google launched Google Plus, which was the challenger to Facebook and social, they were like, everything is open source. Come, it's a colonoscopy all day long. It's just the nature. So Google will both, you know, will talk out of both sides of their mouth, but not because it's like there's this conspiracy, because there's a department of security and compliance and safety. And then there's a department that's engineering and pushing the envelope. It's like credit and sales, you know, like the guy who's selling you the car, he doesn't care that you have horrible credit, but the guy in finance and credit, he's like, well, Rob, you are a deadbeat. You're not getting this car.
To finish off this episode, let's zoom out of the media landscape a little bit, because AI affects a lot more and affects society in some weirder ways than that. What about AI relationships? This is something that's actually been getting a lot of news, and I used Grok for the first time this week, the like voice chat where you can make it become like sexy and stuff like that, and it's really weird. It's very strange to use.
I'm married, so, but I think the combination of the, helicopter parenting, COVID stay, work from home, lack of socializing, way too much gaming, probably took a few too many SSMI medications. All of these things mean that there's a generation that is probably not sexually active at the same age as previous generations, probably not even aware of where do I go to meet. Kids don't drink anymore compared to before. That was part of going to a bar, whether you knew it or not. So I fully see that automation, AI, robotics will make fake relationships or whatever, fake girlfriends or more fake girlfriends. It will become a thing, and it's batshit crazy to me. But if 20 years ago, when the online dating platforms used to call me when I was running sales for Ask Men, I was like, this is weird. Who uses online dating? And I remember even asking the gal at one of the companies who did marketing, I'm like, these are fake profiles. I'm like, these can't be real. And she was like, some are fake, some are not. But if you look at, people, that's how they meet now. They meet largely online. So I think it's really crazy to us. But if you're 12 now, by the time you're 18, if one of your buddies you notice doesn't come out on Fridays because he stays home with his girlfriend, as crazy as it seems.
Yeah, it's weird times.
Now that's the ultimate libertarian, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's only going to get weirder. Well, this has been an enlightening conversation. I think this might be worth having a part 2 sometime down the road, because we're already running long, so I don't want to drag this out too much longer. But thank you, everybody who listened. If you got comments, please leave them. We'll address them in the next episode. I'm really pleased to see the engagement that we had today. Some great questions out there, so thank you for that. And thank you, Ash.
And if you'd be kind enough just to include that storytelling video from Context TV in the comments, if I forget to do it myself.
Yep, absolutely. It's already there. See, okay, cool. Mike is on top of it. He posted
all right.
it.
Mike's the star. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.